you're anything like me, there are places in your heart and corners of your mind that feel just as deep, dark, mysterious, and let's be honest, scary as outer space. Fight as you might, unearthing the happiness and fulfillment that you know is there and yet you feel incapable of, it can feel nearly impossible to lay hold of those things. King David, he gave us a clue and a beautiful, elegant solution. Lift your eyes and look up. Consider the heavens. He said that when he did that, when he looked at the moon, when he looked at the stars, it naturally led him to looking within and saying, what is man that you're mindful of him? The reality is that trying to understand the bigness of outer space has clues that can teach us how to approach conquering inner space. And my prayer is that it would compel you, this book would compel you to live with a more profound sense of purpose, a grander view of Jesus, and set you on a trajectory to life, and life more abundant. Perhaps exploring outer space isn't something you've ever considered could help your walk with God or make your life on this earth better. But maybe, just maybe, it's the very thing you need.
All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Okay, all flight controllers, donut up for landing. Retro. Go. I don't go. Right. Go. Control. Go. Countdown. Go. EMC. Go. Count. Go. Surgeon. Go. Count downward. Go for landing.
I have a suspicion that if you can have your mind blown by the wonders of exploring outer space, it will teach you a lot about how to conquer this dark, mysterious inner space.
Good morning again. It's so good. Like Mark just said, that we went to family camp this week, and I absolutely love camp, but I will say, especially this week, I missed you guys, and I know I don't see all of you during the week anyway, but it's just, I don't know. I'm just glad you guys are back, and it's good to see you guys. And I'm so happy that you're here. So those of you that were here last week, I sound a little bit further into puberty than I did last week as a boy, but I'm still a little scratchy this week. But I feel great. So hopefully you guys can understand me as I'm talking today. I wanted to use this. I know this was a little bit different kind of intro into the sermon than we have done before, but I just wanted to let you know that, first of all, I like to give credit where credit is due. So the Last Supper on the Moon that we are in the 6th week this week is not my original writings. So I want to make sure that you know that I'm actually using Levi Lesko, who was the man that was in this video, from his church, some of the studies that he has done. I've done more studies and added to it, but I wanted to make sure, first of all, that you know it's from him. But secondly, I know towards the beginning of the series, I showed you the book a lot, The Last Supper on the Moon, but I just wanted to give one more plug for that. Quite a few of you have come to me and told me that you have read that book, and it has really, kind of like you said, it blows your mind, some of the things. And that book is not the same as the sermons. And the sermons, we're looking at the 7 miracles in John, but actually in the book, he talks about the 7 last days of Jesus' life and the 7 churches that are referred to in Revelation. So it's a completely different kind of idea that comes from this. But I just want to give one last plug because it's just really an amazing group. And I like today that, like Pastor Mark said, even though I'm not a teacher anymore, coming to the end of summer still kind of makes me a little sad. But I like your superheroes today. Hopefully you've had some fun this summer, just doing something fun. Like we said, one of our core values here at the Well is to have fun. So we've just tried to have a fun summer doing some silly things. I did want to make one more announcement. We announced this last week, but I wanted to announce it one more time just for two different reasons. If you know, we are really big at the Well about meeting on Sundays, coming together, learning, getting together, and then going out into our community. Many of you have talked to Bryce Mosby at the Dream Center. Many of you are becoming mentors. If you are still interested in that, first of all, his talk is on our YouTube channel, and you can just get with me. There are children in Jacobsville area that are on a waiting list waiting for mentors. So if that is in your heart at all, please get with me. I'll get you his information. But secondly, we also really want people to come into the church to help them, not just on Sunday mornings, but coming in to help. So we are starting on this Thursday at 6:30. There is going to be a 12-step group that is going to start meeting at our church. And it is for women only. It is actually for women who are getting out of codependent and abusive relationships. It's called a CODA group. So they are going to be meeting here. So one, if that is something that you personally would want to attend, everybody is free as long as you are female. Everybody is free to come to that. But I also wanted to let you know, because you might not be around during that time, to know that we are opening up our church to be able to do that. And as they start meeting, I kind of want to talk to them and make sure of some of their rules and some of the things that they do. But I want to figure out some ways that we can love on those women that are coming in during that time. So I want to make you aware of the things that we have going on that you might not even realize. But so like I said, over this last 6 weeks now, we have been looking at 7 signs, 7 miracles in the book of John. And we're coming to an end. Next week is our last week, and it makes me a little sad. But we have said that John wrote his gospel, and he picked these certain miracles to tell us about who Jesus is, his character. So at the very end of his gospel, he says, I could fill libraries. There are tons and tons of things that I could have said about Jesus. I could have told you things that he did. But he chose these specific miracles, these specific events that happened to bring us closer to his character. So a morning on the moon lasts a whole week to us. Then it takes another week to get from afternoon to sunset. Then after that, it takes 2 weeks to get from sunset to sunrise the next day, according to our time. So the light of day on the moon is different than how it is on Earth. And today we're going to look at someone who sees light in a different way than we do, and is going to see the light of day for the first time. So when Buzz and Neil were coming, that first time they were coming to the moon, as they were flying close to the moon, you can hear in the audio, they're about 40 feet from the lunar surface. And as they get close, you can kind of hear, I don't want to say that they were scared, but a voice that's saying, we're picking up dust, we're picking up dust. And that is because the lunar surface is made of kind of a gray beach sand. And so as they were getting close to that, their propellers or whatever is under there was kicking up that dust. And because gravity is different on the moon, it's not there, the way that the dust was reacting, they were actually at the most important part of their descent, of their landing, they were flying blind. They just had to hope that the people who had picked out the spot for them, who had made all the calculations, had picked out the right spot for them to land, because they couldn't see what was going on beneath them. That word flying blind, that phrase actually comes from World War II pilots, that as they were flying, that there was low visibility. And so they would be fighting and they would be trying to, get around, and they couldn't see what was going on. Think about planes at that time were different than the way that we see, planes now. So they were flying blind. That's what came up. And so today, what my prayer is for you as we read this miracle and as we talk about it is that I feel like so many of us in our life, in our relationships, both spiritual and beyond, are flying blind. We're just hoping for the best. We're hoping other people are telling us good things to do, where we're supposed to be, where we're supposed to be landing, and we don't even realize the blindness that we have. So I'm hoping by the end today that we start to open our eyes a little bit to the blindness that we have, and also start to have some empathy and some grace for those around us that are also blind, and ways in which we can help them open their eyes and see the light of Jesus. So, like I said, this whole time we've been in the book of John, and we're going to start at chapter 9. We're going to look at verses 1 through 12 to begin. Now, as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither this man or his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had said these things, this is going to get a little weird. When he said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva and the dirt that was there. And he anointed the eyes of the blind man with this clay he had made. And he said to him, go and wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. Therefore, the neighbors and those who had previously seen that he was blind said, is this not the man who sat and begged? Some said, this is he. Others said, he is like him. But the man said, I am he. Now, you can keep reading on your own, but I'm going to kind of summarize this next section that happens. So this man is healed by Jesus. He had been blind since birth. He is healed. He can see. He's saying, it's me. I can see now. But what happens is the Pharisees, the religious leaders, come and they start interrogating him. And they start asking him about who made him be able to see. Was he really blind from birth? All of these questions. They even call in the healed man's parents to come in and question them. And they basically say, he's a grown man. Why are you asking us? You ask him what happened. And they talk to him. So finally, at the end, he is actually excommunicated from the church. He is not allowed to participate in the temple and the sacrifices. So in his Jewish culture, in his life, that's pretty much everything. He's not allowed to participate in any of that. So now we're going to look at, we're still in chapter 9, verse 35, because Jesus hears about this happening. And so Jesus comes back to this man now after all of these things have happened to him. Jesus had heard that they had cast him out. And when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of God? And he answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? And Jesus said to him, you have both seen him, and it is he who you are talking to right now. Then he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. So Jesus went back when all of those things happened and said, I am the Son. I am God. And the man immediately worshiped him. So what we're going to look at 5 kind of different movements, 5 different sections of this story to help us understand our own blindness a little bit more and how we can help those around us. The very first movement is the wrong question. And we see this, we talked a lot about the disciples, and we have to remember the disciples are teenage boys that are hanging out with him. This is all new to them. And so they just are kind of ridiculous sometimes. The questions, do you ever have like people say, there's no wrong question, and then you have somebody at work ask the stupidest question ever, and you're like, maybe there are wrong questions. Well, there are wrong questions, and they ask ridiculous questions all the time. So right before this was happening, Jesus and his disciples were walking through Jerusalem. And Jesus had been telling people, I am God. He had not been telling them, I'm a good man, I can do good things for you. He had literally been saying, I am he. I am God. So there were people, as he walked by, there were the Jewish leaders were trying to throw rocks at him and stone him. So this is what was happening as he walked by. So he's walking, people are trying to stone him, and he sees a beggar on the side of the road. And Jesus sees him. He sees him sitting there. And no matter what is going on around him, he stops and notices him. And if you will look at every miracle that we have talked about so far, it always happens because Jesus sees someone. Jesus sees someone's need. He takes note of them. And I want us to think about our own lives. When we have, hopefully we're not walking around people trying to kill us, but we have things, busyness, just crazy things going on in our lives sometimes. And do we take note of people in need? And I'm not just talking about the people, that are by the stoplights, that are holding signs. I'm talking about the people where you work, that you can tell by their face something is wrong. Maybe the person that you're buying groceries from at Walmart that's checking you out, and you can tell something is wrong. Do you stop all the chaos that's going around you, and do you stop and look them in the eyes and think, I need to see this person. I need to stop and see what is going on with them. Well, Jesus stopped and talked to this man because he saw them. And the first thing that the disciples asked was, who sinned? I mean, this guy's been blind from birth, so there has to be a reason. There has to be a cause for his suffering. So who sinned? Now, in that culture, it sounds very strange to us, but in that culture, at that time, they believed that a person could actually sin in the womb. So even though this person was born blind from birth, that they believed that he could still have sinned before he was born. But Jesus asked the right question. He didn't ask who sinned or what was the cause. He said, what can God do through this? Through the miracle I'm going to do. What can happen? How can God's kingdom be furthered through this miracle? Now, it's human nature to want to know why. When things happen, especially for me, it's with kids. When something happens with kids, I think, man, why is that happening? Something is wrong. Something is going on. But what we have to do, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, what we have to do eventually when we are in heaven and we can see everything that happened, we will be able to understand. But no matter how hard it is right now, all God asks us to do is just trust. Trust that he is good now. But the disciples kept wanting a reason. They said it must be A or it must be B. Either his parents must have sinned or he sinned to cause this problem. And at the culture that time, that's all there was, A or B. But Jesus flipped the script and said, nope, it's actually C. It's neither one of those. Nothing happened. We're not going to figure out the cause. We're going to see what I'm going to do through this. Now, when President Kennedy made his speech, we watched it on here, about saying that we're going to go to the moon, we're going to be there. At the time that he said that, none of the technology to get to the moon was invented yet. He was just saying that from his own, passion that he wanted. So sometimes it's easy to say those things, but then we have to build that support to be able to do those things. So a man named Werner von Braun, who was an actual literal rocket scientist, he asked the wrong question. He said, how can we build a rocket strong enough to get to the moon? And that sounds like a pretty decent question. If you want to go to the moon, how are we going to build a rocket strong enough to get to the moon? But he should have asked, how can we build a rocket strong enough to carry a ship to get to the moon? And I think we have a picture up here of the Apollo spacecraft. So there was a man that came along, and we're going to see him in just a minute. I think if we don't have a picture. So the Apollo spacecraft is actually a couple different sections. It's on there. Okay, sorry. Okay, so the Apollo spacecraft actually was built in a couple different sections. So there are sections that get it there. There are sections that break off. There was a moon landing part. And there was a man, if we can look at the next picture, there's a man named John Hobart. And he is this guy at the chalkboard. He was the one that came up with this idea. Everybody was trying to say that we need a rocket that's strong enough to get to the moon. And he was like, I think we actually need a rocket that comes apart, that has different sections that can carry a ship to the moon. And kind of like Noah, when he built the ark, he was laughed out from everyone. Everyone just discredited everything he said, you are ridiculous. Why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense. But it was eventually a success, because that's the only way that we could get to the moon. So sometimes there are questions that are asked that seem reasonable. But with God, we have to go beyond what is reasonable and look deeper and ask different questions. So the disciples, the question that they asked, it was kind of like, have you guys ever played that game, Two Truths and a Lie at all? Anybody? I was always very good at that game, which I don't know what that says about me. But so two truths. So one truth was, sometimes a person can do something, can sin in some way that will cause hardship in their life. If you are abusing drugs, that causes hardship on your body. There are things, if you have an affair, that will cause hardship on your relationship. There is a truth that some of the sin that you commit can cause hardship on your life. The same is true if you come from a family. If your parents sinned in some way, financially, were abusive in some way, that can cause your life to have hardship also. So both of those things can be true. But the lie is that every time you see pain, every time someone is hurt or something is going on in their life, that there is specifically someone to blame for it. That is a lie. There is, and I know this is kind of that Hallmark answer, but there is sin in the world. And until Jesus comes back and we are all his new creations and we are living in the New Jerusalem, there is always going to be sin in the world. But it is hard when we look at who is to blame? That's the wrong question that we still ask today, because we can get caught up on that who is to blame when there's nobody to blame. Sometimes you're just born blind. Sometimes things just happen. And I think in our Christian culture, especially in the United States, we like to use the Bible and use verses that are meant for our good, but we like to use them to soften people's suffering. Instead of being there with them, out of the goodness of our heart, we want to make them feel better. So we misuse some verses. One of the verses that we misuse a lot is Romans 8:28. And it reads, "And we know that for those that love God, all good things work together for the good, for those that are called according to his purpose." Have you guys heard that verse some before? People telling you, "Oh, I'm so sorry this horrible thing happened to you, but all things work for the good. If you love God, all things work for the good." And that is a verse, and it's kind of like that 2 truths and a lie. There is truth to that, obviously, because it's in the Bible. But if we keep reading to the next verse, it changes our perspective of actually what that verse means. The next verse, Romans 8:29 reads, "For God knew his people in advance and chose them to become like his son, so that his son would be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters." So when we read that first verse and we say, "Oh, all things are for our good," we think good, like everything's going to be, rainbows and unicorns, and our life is going to be good. But if we read further, actually what it means is the good is drawing us closer to Jesus and to be more like him. So if we need to have a little kick in the butt and some things that happen to bring us closer to God and to be more like him, that might not feel or seem good to us in the moment. So we have to think about the verses that we use and the questions that we ask when we stop and see someone who is suffering. There's no suffering that is ever without purpose. There is no suffering that's ever senseless. It is for our good, but that good is to make us more like Jesus. And if you know Jody Erickson Tata, she was a swimmer who, I think when she was 16 years old, she went on a dive and broke her spine and has been in a wheelchair for years and years and years and years now. And she goes around speaking, and she said, "I would rather be in this wheelchair knowing God than on my feet without him." So she has spent her life paralyzed. What we would see is something horrible that happened to her. And I'm sure she's not happy that this happened to her, but she said, "If this is what makes me close to God, I would rather have this than being able to walk and not have God in my life." So that first movement, and it was the longest one, just so you know, is that wrong question. That's what we have to think about first. When we see suffering, when we are suffering, the question we need to ask is, how is this making me more like Jesus? The second movement is a strange solution. So he goes up, he sees this man who is blind, and his first idea is, "Oh, I'm going to spit on the ground and make some mud." To us, that sounds really, really strange. But if you look at Jesus' miracles, he never performed a miracle in the same way. He always could look into the person and figure out what would help them spiritually, help them the most on the inside, and do that for them. So he goes in and he's like, "Oh, let me just make some mud and stick it on your face. It sounds strange. But it's kind of a hint of the gospel. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18 reads, "For the messages of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God." And I don't know if you've ever felt like that. If you try to share the gospel with someone who is not a believer, we've talked about this, just short plug for our very last small group tonight at 6 o'clock. We have been talking about the book Gospeler, how to share our faith. But sometimes you share your faith, sorry, don't yell at me, but it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like, yeah, there's this guy, he died on a cross, he took all my sins away, he's going to come back, like trumpets, white horse, I mean, it sounds like an HBO movie. Like, it doesn't sound like it could be reality at all. It sounds really strange. But when it gets into your soul and you believe it and you see the change in other people, it might still not make sense, but you understand it. You believe it. That's kind of like this strange solution. It just sounded weird, but then the people could see it and believe it. It kind of seemed like Jesus made the situation worse, because when he came up, there was a blind man begging, and now this blind man's face is covered with mud. So it almost at first seems like he made the situation worse. But what he did is he told the man to go wash off in this pool. So the man, he could have just touched him. He could have just said, "You are healed," and he would be healed. But by putting that mud on and making the man go in his darkness and wash off, he was making the man take a step of faith. Take a step of faith out and wash that off and see for the first time. Our next one is, the next movement is a distorted fixation. Now, we saw this whenever, if you guys were here, when we talked about the man at the pool of Bethesda that was lame, and then he could walk, and he picked up his mat, and all the people started yelling at him about carrying his mat on the Sabbath. The same thing happened. I mean, this man was a beggar and had been blind for his whole life. And when he got up to see, instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, like this is amazing, tell me about the colors that you see, tell me about all of these things," they said, who did this on the Sabbath? And they started criticizing him and started talking about the man who did this instead of the miracle that had been done. Now, Jesus could have picked any day to do his miracles, any day at all. But at that time, the Pharisees would always say, only God can work on the Sabbath. Now, I was this week at family camp. I was told that I can be passive-aggressive at times. I said there's no passivity in it. I can just be aggressive. But I think Jesus is perfect, so he's not passive-aggressive. But I feel that in what he says next, because he did 7 miracles on the Sabbath. So if they are saying only God can do miracles on the Sabbath, and he does miracles on the Sabbath, he's like, who do you think I am? If I'm doing this, if I'm working on the Sabbath, I am telling you, I am he. I am God. It's one more way of him just saying, I am who you are looking for. You're saying you're looking for this Messiah. You're looking for this king to come and help you. But I'm he. I'm working 7 times. I have done these miracles on the Sabbath. That is who I am. Now, sometimes in our life, we might not be fixated on not looking at miracles, but we get a fixation of working for God. We think, God has saved me. I just love him. So I am going to do everything I can to earn what he has given to me. That's kind of, a lot of us, that's our upbringing, is that we gotta put in our time, we gotta put in our work. So we might, volunteer all the time at church. We might, go help at the Dream Center. We might do all of these amazing things. And those things are all great. There is nothing wrong with those things. But if we do those things to earn the love of God, to earn the grace that he's given us, we're fixated on the wrong thing. Our eyes are set on the wrong direction, because that can be exhausting to just always be working for God. Not working out of our love for him, but working because we're trying to earn the love that we want from him. And sometimes in our pride, it kind of feels like it gives us a leg to stand on. Like, oh, well, nothing's bad is going to happen to me. My marriage is going to be great. My kids are going to be great because I work for God so much. I'm a pastor. I work at the church. I volunteer. I give all this. So because I do that, then nothing is ever going to happen to me. And if it does, and I'm like, God, I've been doing all this stuff for you. Why are you doing this to me? But what we have to realize is that no matter what we do, none of us are good enough to earn the love of God, no matter how little or how much that we do. God's grace and his gift to us is just that. It's just a gift. It's because he loves us and because he sees us where we are and he created us. There is no way that we can ever earn that love for him. I love this quote, and this is from the book. It says, religion says do. Religion says you have to keep going, you have to keep pushing, you have to read your Bible, you have to go to church, you have to do all of these things, which are great things, but you have to do those for God to love you. Religion says do, but the cross says done. It is finished because he loves us no matter what. When we look at the thief on the cross that he talked to for just a few minutes, it was done with him as much as it was done with his disciples who followed him and spread his word forever. So we do those things. We read our Bible. We come to church. We help with things out of the love that we have received, not because we are trying to receive the love for him. The fourth movement in the fourth section is living with vision. So this man is healed. He is seen now. And that is an amazing miracle. But on the flip side, and this is going to sound weird, he spent his days just sitting at the city gate begging. He wasn't responsible for anything. He didn't have to do anything. He really didn't have to have a life. So on one way, it's amazing that he can see, amazing that his eyes are opened. But when his eyes are open, now he has to live this new life. He has to go out. He has to see. He has to live differently. And that's what happens with us when we have one encounter with Jesus. This says we don't know, the Bible doesn't really tell us where this man went from after this. He could have been following Jesus. He could be a man in some of the other Gospels or some of Paul's letters. But all we know is this is his only encounter with Jesus. So one encounter with Jesus can change everything. And when he opens our eyes up to the supernatural reality, to what we are to do, to the people that we are to look at, the people that we are to see, and the people that we are to help, we're not earning love from him by doing that, But it is our responsibility, now that we know his love, to share that with others and to do what we can to see others and to see their blindness and to see what they are going through and to help them through that. John 9:25 reads, and this is talking about the man that was healed. So this is what the man that was healed answered and said, whether he is a sinner or not, he's talking about Jesus, whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. The one thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. And he's saying, I don't really know this guy, Jesus. I don't know that much about him. I mean, I know, that I've heard people say he's a rabbi. I have heard people talking about him. But the thing that I know is I was blind. I had an encounter with him, and now I can see. And we've talked about this in our small group on Sundays. That's all we need to do. That's the story that we have. Some of us know all kinds of theology and have read the Bible 15 times. Some of us have never read the Bible and have just met Jesus and don't know very much. It doesn't matter. You know what Jesus did in your life. And all you can say is, I was blind, and now I can see. And let me tell you my story. That's all. That's all that we are expected to do. And that's our only focus. The last section here is active participation. Matthew 5:14 reads, you are the light of the world. A city that is set on the hill cannot be hidden. Now, when we were reading earlier, Jesus said, I'm the light. And when he came, he was the focus. He was the one that was doing the miracles. He was the one that was teaching. He was the one that was, showing people that he was God, that he was the Messiah. But when he left, he said, it's up to you guys. It's up to you to spread my light. If you've ever looked, especially with our eclipse this year, we know, and you have your eclipse shirt on, perfect today. You can't look at the sun for very long, just normal. You can't look at the sun for very long because it hurts your eyes. It's so bright. But the moon actually reflects the sun. So you can look at the moon forever and not, have your eyes burn, not have all of those things. So as the light of the world, we are not the light. We are not the sun. We are not Jesus. We are going to mess up. We are going to do things, but we are the reflection of him, just like the moon. We are what the world needs to see. Now, on Apollo 12, which was just after the moon landing, they had this great idea that they said, Apollo 11, the moon landing, all the film were black and white. That was old school. We're going to take a camera that is color. And so we're going to take this camera and we're going to film everything, and it's going to be in color, and the people back on Earth are going to be able to see all of this amazing footage. Well, 42 minutes into the mission, one of the astronauts accidentally pointed the camera straight at the sun and fried it. So not only did they not have black and white footage, they didn't have, not only did they not have black and white, they didn't have color, they didn't have any kind of footage. All they had was audio. So just side note, if you are a conspiracy theorist, that a lot of the conspiracies about space and the moon and everything come because the news channels didn't want to just broadcast black screen and the audio from this, so they broadcast whenever the astronauts were practicing and were working and things, and so you can kind of see some strings hanging from things, but that was all their practice rounds and things, and they just put those pictures up to have something visual while they were on there. But anyway, so there are people in our world that cannot see God. They are in darkness. Their eyes are covered. They can't see him. And they can't look directly at him. Sometimes they're scared. They don't want to come straight to church. They don't want to do the things to look directly at him. And so this is what God tells us to do. We're going to look at 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 5 through 7. You see, we don't go around preaching about ourselves. We preach that Jesus Christ is Lord. And we ourselves are your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who says, let there be light in darkness, has made this light shine in our hearts, so we know the glory of God that is seen in the face of Jesus Christ. We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God, but not ourselves. So he tells us, remember, that when he made Adam from the dirt. And he tells us later that we are like these clay jars. We are fragile. We have things, our bodies fall apart, but also our emotions can fall apart. We are just fragile. But when we have that light inside of us, especially through those cracks, through those things that have happened into us, that light can shine. And I think when we think about how Jesus, we said that all of these miracles are telling us about Jesus. Jesus used this dirt, this clay on this man's eyes for him to see, just like he uses us that are made from dirt in these fragile clay jars that we are, to help open the eyes of other people in our world, so we can be the reflection of Jesus to them in our world. If you guys could go ahead and bow your heads and close your eyes. Lord, I just don't even know what to say sometimes. We are just so thankful. We are thankful for your word, and we are thankful for the way that you come to us. We are thankful, first of all, that we have to do nothing. There is nothing that we even can do to earn your love. You just love us because you made us and because we are your children. And we just thank you for the grace that you've given us. And as we're here today, I want us to think about if this touched you and you have people that you want to see, and you really want to be that moon, and you want to shine the light of the world, of Jesus, into other people who cannot see it. I want to pray for us because I want that to be what our church is all about. So if you would like prayer, if you have somebody specific, or just in general, if that's just who you want to be, if you would raise your hand today, and we can pray for you so you can be that light that shines into the dark world. God, thank you so much for the hands that are raised today. Thank you that you have given us this light. Thank you that we all have a story, no matter what it was, that we were blind and now we see. Help bring people into our lives and help our eyes be open to them to be able to share our story with them. Thank you so much for everybody that was here today and for your word. We love you in your name.